Hello team and welcome to another ATP Geopolitics video with myself, Jonathan MSP. This is Ukraine War News Update, first part thereof for the 20th of November 2023. Just a few bits of, housekeeping to begin with before I get into the news. I'm doing a live stream tonight, 8 PM UK time, with Exit, who is someone who contributes maritime news and information on Andrew Perpetua's live stream. You can check out my channel, go down to the upcoming live streams and check it out there. We're going to talk about all sorts of things to do with the Black Sea, maritime matters and what have you. You can also go to the live tab on the front page and I'll have it there. And you can check out my live with Jonathan Fink from Silicon Curtain, which I thought was a hugely enjoyable live stream. So check that out. And of course, all my other ones. I've just literally 2 minutes ago had a message from Jessica Arrow to say she's happy to talk. So hopefully going to have a live stream with the author of Putin's Trolls to talk about disinformation. I think that'll be a fascinating live stream. Really looking forward to that. So check that out on, again, the live tab to see when I can arrange that. Anyway, let's go to where we normally start. Ukrainian general staff figures for the Russian losses for the day before. All the usual caveats apply, and you can find them in the description to this video found below. Right, okay. We have a low day across all the categories, and this looks to be a Monday, as a result of Sunday, a Monday low figure. This happens sometimes, although not all the time, but quite often we do see Russian figures drop on a Monday as a result of not being able to accumulate the figures in the same way. I don't know how it affects the administration, but it is a Sunday, and sometimes we see lower figures on a Sunday as a result of Saturday. However, it could also be weather related. That is often a reason we see a drop in figures, as drones are unable to fly as effectively and maneuvers are more difficult. Mud takes its toll, so it could be that as well, and it could also be, OPSEC or whatever. Lots of reasons that there could be a drop. Anyway, 640 personnel is relatively low, although higher than at most of the days for the beginning couple of months of the counteroffensive. Really, that's the Ukrainian counteroffensive. Then we have 4 tanks, 2 APVs, 4 artillery systems, 1 multiple launch rocket system. So that's really low figures for all of those categories. 9 drones. Again, that would be last night, but the night before, as I often say. And 7 vehicles and fuel tanks, 1 piece of special equipment. So nothing really to comment about in terms of those figures. Look at Andrew Perpetua, the mapper who I refer to an awful lot, who counts up the lost equipment on a daily basis on all the socials, has a fairly typical day, I guess, here, about 3-to-1 loss ratio Russian to Ukrainian losses. Let's look at the Ukrainian stats, see what kind of things have been lost. Howitzers mainly, 5 howitzers, and that's pretty much the most of it there. And then when we look at the Russian losses, the Pantsir S1, I can show you the video of that in a second. Couple of Grads, multiple launch rocket systems themselves taken out by Gimlers. And then we have, I presume that'd be sort of HIMARS strike or similar. Then we have some tanks, T-80s, T-72, and infantry fighting vehicles, usual culprits, and APCs, and down to trucks and civilian pieces of kit. So that would be a higher value loss for the Russians there, although the Ukrainians will rue the loss of 5 bits of artillery, that's for sure. Okay, moving on to look at other bits and pieces. We're going to go first to troop losses. Mediatzona confirms identities of over 37,000 Russian soldiers killed in Ukraine. So this is the BBC Russia Mediatzona project, where they are looking at Russian social media platforms to see, and they have pretty tight criteria for this, but they see who has died, who's been announced in terms of obituaries, funeral announcements, and as long as it's definitely linked to the war, even if it's someone is fighting in the war and they're found out to have died, if it's not explicitly connected to the war, they won't count it. The real bare minimum number. The 37,000 is absolutely your benchmark bottom end. The Ukrainians released similar figures recently and showed, I think, was it 30,000? But I don't know if the criteria is similar. If these are, because I know that these Russian figures have real low, quite high benchmarks, high criteria hoops you've got to jump through in order to get these stats, and they also don't include, as far as I know, I might need to look into this, but DPR, LPR, and I'm not sure about Wagner either. So there will be, this will be the very much a low end compared to. Point is, I don't know if it's totally comparable to the Ukrainian figures. Now, if it is totally comparable to the Ukrainian figures, then that's close to parity, which is a real worry for the Ukrainians. But actually, I think the Russian figures will be far higher, and the multiplier to the Russian figures, I think, will be different to the multiplier you'd apply to the Ukrainian figures. Anyway, through open source research, Russian independent media outlet Mediazona, together with BBC Russia, confirmed the names of 37,052 Russian soldiers who have been killed since the beginning of Russia's full-scale invasion. In the latest update, 14 names were added to the list who had the rank of lieutenant colonel or higher, quote, nearly setting an all-time record, according to Mediazona. What this might indicate is that Russian command and control centers are being hit, or that Russian higher command are being brought down to actions on, on the shop floor, if you like. That could tell you something, but certainly higher ranked individuals are being added to the list at a greater rate at the moment. Right, and now we're going to go to Krinky, which is on the Dnipro River. Here we have a source, a Ukrainian source, talking about activities going on there and confirming the idea that the Russians have bombed themselves. I know we've heard of this by using Western mappers with what they think were mistakes and whatnot. They end up bombing their own people. I think that's an incident that happened, but I think there are further incidents that have happened since then. I think this isn't confirming that, but further incidents. I asked my comrade for the 36th, from the 36th, about the state of prospects on the left bank in winter, to which I received the answer. Quote, I can't even imagine what will happen. This operation is so unlike anything else that it is difficult to predict anything. Russia releases KABs in packs, so those are the guided glide bombs that the Russian VKS, their air force, release, particularly around Kherson, particularly on the Dnipro River, really heavily bombarded with these KABs. Yesterday, for example, each sortie was 2 KABs on the territory of our bridgehead, but our aviation is also very active here, really very active. Yesterday, I saw how the Russians threw 2 KABs into their positions. It was a holiday. So this is very recent, and this is aviation hitting their own troops with KAB 500 bombs, or KAB glide guide bombs. They could be the 250 variant. The destruction of Russian equipment by various means on the bank is similar in number to the direction of Avdiivka during an active assault. That's interesting. This is a meat grinder for the equipment, tanks, grads, SAU. I will only say that if the bridgeheads are not increased, they will have to be abandoned. So while there is time before winter, we act every day. In other words, it's kind of now or never. We need to expand those bridgeheads, because if we don't, then we're just inviting the Russians to hammer us in those limited areas. You need a much larger area to spread out your troops and not be easy pickings for aviation, for artillery, etc., etc. Okay, moving on. Again, we're looking at well, I say again, we're going to look at equipment here. A T-90M, so this is the most modern, highest value Russian tank. With people up popping the hatch there. I can't show it to you. It fundamentally explodes, and it does make me wonder if there's a difference between the T-90. We know with the auto loaders, they have the the ammunition that can pop turrets and what have you in a lot of these Russian tanks. This absolutely goes up to the point there's virtually nothing left of it, and you can rest assured that none of the crew survived. Now, I want to know whether the more modern Ukrainian tanks that have been donated by NATO and allies, such as your Leopard 2s, your Abrams, your Challengers, whether they are much more survivable when they go. They often have the ammunition in the back, and that can eject when the tank is hit, and so there are mechanisms in place to ensure the survival of the crew inside. But that piece of footage, and you can, even though I don't play these videos, you can always check out the URLs to them and play them yourselves, as the first two segments to my opening video always have the links in the description below. Anyway, that goes that tank. And here we have the Panzer that was mentioned before. This is a destruction of the Panzer, and it goes big time. So that is hit, and that'll be a pretty high value air defense system taken out, and that's in the Kherson region. So when you're talking about the Ukrainians using their own weapons in the Kherson region, actually it's not from that source, but you'll see next, when the Ukrainians are starting to use their own aviation, they might well be using JDAMs in the Kherson region. That will be because things like this Panzer have been taken out, allowing the Ukrainians much greater freedom to use their own air force. So this has been geolocated to somewhere behind the front line. It's not crazy close, but it's in that Kherson region, and it will be able to take out Ukrainian air frames over Kherson Oblast on the Ukrainian side, and that will be a sore loss for the Russians, not just in terms of value and replacement, but in terms of the capability in the area, which then leads on to something like this. So if this is a JDAM, as some people have said, it might be Storm Shadow or Scout, but I don't think it is. So powerful Ukrainian JDAM strike obliterates a Russian warehouse in the Kherson region. And there's quite a bit of talk about this hit because it might have been quite high value hit. It was a sort of hangar warehouse. Some people saying hangar. Looks to me be a hangar next to an airport of some sort there. Anyway, it was taken out. So I think that would have been a high value strike with JDAM and good see JDAMs being used, which means if JDAMs are being used, then they feel somewhat more confident to fly their planes close enough to the front line to be able to use them, which means that they have probably degraded Russian air defenses along the Dnipro, as you can see from that hit of the Panzer. Tendar here saying he said Storm Shadow Scout, but actually then said I was only speculating. Some other people saying Gimlers, could be JDAM, could be Gimlers, not 100% sure. Another long-range striker on a Russian base, this time a flight hangar, 35 kilometers from the Dnipro River, and that is geolocated to here. That Panzer was further back from there that we just seen. So in this whole area, there is a degradation of Russian command and control, air defense capability, electronic warfare capability, so on and so forth. They're doing a good job of degrading the Russian stuff in and around Dnipro as they need to in order to expand that bridgehead. Now, this is Barracuda, who posts stuff from both sides here, but says, although things seem to be going according to the Russians' wishes in the industrial plant area south of Avdiivka, this is a worrying area for the Ukrainians. I think the Ukrainians are in a bit of trouble around Avdiivka. This is not the case, he says. In the video shared by the 110th Mechanized Brigade of Ukraine, you can check this out yourself. It's a general montage of stuff being hit. It was seen that many vehicles belonging to the Russian army are targeted with FPV kamikaze drones in the industrial zone south of Avdiivka. But actually, the Russians have lost tanks there. They've lost various equipment in that area. But I think they are still making those moves forward. And this is the Russian way of doing things, which is taking territory at an incredible cost in terms of personnel and equipment. So, although Barracuda might point out that there's an awful lot of stuff being destroyed in this area of the the industrial zone to the southeast of Avdiivka. The Russians are still making those advances, and I'm sure they're calculating it's still worth their while to do so, even with those heavy losses. Then, when we come to Russia on fire, there is a university establishment, Ranepa establishment in southwestern Moscow, that's on fire. I have no idea how damaging that fire was or what caused it. Nonetheless, another example of Russia on fire. These kind of incidents happen so often that there's definitely something more to it than just bad fire safety. And I've actually analysed the figures on two separate occasions to show that, yes, they are above average, and the types of fires, they are bigger fires, and the places that they're at are different. So this is almost certainly connected to the war in some way. Not to say all of the fires I report are, but certainly at least some of them. And then Romanov, a pro-Russian, a Russian military blogger here, saying that the deputy minister of the Ministry of Internal Affairs of the Republic was blown up. Akhmat forces managed to pull him out and a guard out of the burning car and took him to hospital. I'm not exactly sure where that is, though. So, yeah, of the Republic, that's going to be Donetsk or Luhansk, one would have thought. He's generally operating around Kherson, though, Romanov, at the moment. So, not quite sure exactly who that pertains to, but it's not looking good for whoever was in that vehicle. Okay, moving on to distance strikes, and actually, first thing is really to talk about shelling. I've moved it to this section and not the previous one just because there wasn't a lot to talk about in terms of strikes. So Kherson is under attack this morning again. It has been hammered again over the last 24 hours by Russian shelling. Shells hit a transport company car park, no evidence of military vehicles, just yet again targeting civilians and infrastructure. One other person was injured. 2 drivers were killed here. And in fact, a number of people up and down the Dnipro, I think, civilians have been killed due to shelling over the last 24 hours, but really you could extrapolate that to the last X number of months since Ukraine took back Kherson and the right bank of the river. Been pretty horrific along that river with shelling, but also FAB 500s or KAB 500s. Right, talking about those munitions, here is the first documented use by Russia of a 500 kilogram cluster type aerial bomb, the RBK 500. This is in Donetsk. You can see the little flashes of all of these over quite a large area. That is, yeah, not going to be nice, although that does seem to have landed in the middle of a field. But here you can see there's a really wide area there. Not nice. So that is the Russians using their own cluster munitions, and something we haven't seen previously. So one can assume from this that they are producing new munitions. Otherwise, we would have seen this earlier. Is my supposition. So that is a worry for the Ukrainians if the Russians can produce and utilize large cluster munitions like that. Okay, Moscow last night, there was another drone attack. Don't know what happened, what the details were, but nonetheless.
Нихуя себе дрон въебал, глянь нахуй. Прям на трассе, ебать, на аварийках все стали, пиздец. Все горит кругом.
Whether it's been shot down by air defense, I don't know. And then this CCTV camera catches a large explosion. Sorry, just cycling around again. You can see that bright explosion there. So Moscow did receive something from Ukraine. Just don't know really the details, where and what. Right, now, if you remember, I reported on Bogdan Ermokin. He was deported to Russia as a child. He's still 17, but I think he's just turned 18. And he had a conscription summons handed to him. So he was deported from Ukraine as a Ukrainian child into Russia, essentially kidnapped, and then said, right, you're going to fight for the Russian army against Ukrainians. This is all pretty controversial. Well, he is now been reconciled. He's in Ukraine, and as you can see from this video, he returned just after his 18th birthday and was greeted by quite a few people. I think his sister is his guardian in Ukraine, so I don't know the fate of his parents. But anyway, he's back home, and I presume happy to be home. Photographs have come out here of him. So 18-year-old Bogdan Yermokin, deported by the Russians from Mariupol, returned to Ukraine. The boy was taken from Russia to Minsk, and from there to Ukraine. His sister accompanied him. Today is Bogdan's birthday, so good news for him. Now, another sort of rescue here, heartwarming rescue in the face of Russian aggression. I just thought I'd throw this in. In Avdiivka, Ukrainian police and volunteers evacuated 2 horses left stranded for 6 months since their farm was destroyed by Russians. And this is coming from the National Police of Ukraine here. I'll probably get hit by copyright for the music, but you can see the destruction of the settlement here of Avdiivka, and here we have 2 horses. As we're starting to see snow hit Ukraine, it's obviously going to be important for these animals that they have somewhere better than just roaming around a war zone. But it's almost, this reminds me of, I don't know, Far Cry or any other kind of post-apocalyptic kind of scenario, The Last of Us or whatever, where you get towns and cities just reduced to ruin, but also deserted. Anyway, good to see those horses evacuated from that war zone. And I mentioned the mud already once. Well, here is a Canadian Senator armored vehicle somewhere near the front line, and look at it struggle with the mud. So this isn't even the worst mud you can see. I mean, this is barely, I guess, gentle Rasputitsa. At the height of the mud season, you would really struggle to get this vehicle moving. And you can see it's really struggling there. That is why the mud season is a challenge for any kind of maneuvers. Not just, for human beings in trenches and getting trench foot and like the conditions, but just being able to maneuver otherwise fairly robust vehicles. This is where you're going to start getting even tanks getting stuck. Right, and talking about the weather, a ship with Ukrainian grain from Odessa splits in half near the Turkish coast. It's most likely likely happened due to severe Black Sea storm. Well, not only that, there has been a ship that has been lost. A Turkish ship has been lost, I believe, that was transporting grain. It's been lost in the Black Sea. So really bad weather. We'll talk about this and other things concerning the Black Sea tonight when I speak with Exit. So please, as I say again, please check out that live stream. Anyway, take care, speak soon. Thanks for watching.